Morning all. Let's get started. So in the last class, what we did is we saw a couple of cases like how we can migrate deleted components. Uh, so we also see the two types of options which were available while migrating deleted components. One is the pre-destructive changes and the other one is post-destructive changes. So now what we will do today is we will see another case of how we can run test classes while doing deployment, and post that we will start with setting up the CI/CD process for Bitbucket project. So now let's consider the case of how we can run test classes while doing the deployments, and points which we should remember while running the test classes. In order to do that, so what I will do is I will pick a class and test class from Google, and I will make use of that class and internet. So I'm not going to write any I'm not going to prepare any Apex class for that. So I'll simply make use of one of the existing Apex classes. So in order to do that, so let me open. Okay. So what I will do is I'll pick a class and test class. So there are few trailhead modules which will give you a class and test class. You can make use of that in order to practice this. So I'm simply typing in class and test class Salesforce and go here. So first I will copy the class code, and I'm also copying the test class code as well. Okay, so as of now, I have a class and test class created in my dev work. So generally, in Salesforce, there is something called as test classes. So test class is nothing but it is a programmatic way of testing an Apex class. So while deploying to few environments, so what happens is Salesforce will ask us to run the test classes as well. So whenever we run the test classes, what happens is there will be something called as code coverage. So I said that test class will be used in order to test a class programmatically. And whenever you run a test class, what happens is Salesforce will provide you something called as Salesforce will check something in the backend and it will calculate something called as code coverage. So as of now, I have this class. So if I check the code coverage of this class as of now, it's 0% or it's set to none. So now what I will do is I will run the test class related to this class, so that some it gets some code coverage, or the code coverage gets calculated. So whenever we run a test class, what happens is the code coverage gets calculated. So what I will do is I'll run this test class. So in order to do that, so I have just opened the test class and I click on this run test button. Okay. So now what happened is, so I ran the test class associated to this class. And if you see here, there is 100% coverage. So when I clicked on coverage, so I can see the coverage as 100%. So the meaning of this is this test class has tested all the lines of code that are present in this class. So 100% coverage means the test class whichever we ran has tested all of the lines that are present in the test class, uh, present in the actual class. So now we have a class and test class. So the class has 100% code coverage with this test class. So now I will show you how we can deploy a class while running uh, deploy a class by running the test class into a different org. So for that, I will pick the QA org which we were using in the earlier sessions. So I will deploy this class as well as the test class into QA org by running the test class. So in order to do that, so let me go to VS Code and VS Code. Let me open the SFDX project I'm using for I'm using in the earlier sessions. So it's okay. So now I need to retrieve a class and test class. So I will specify the class as well as test class in package.xml. Let me copy the name. So I can even do it from Workbench as well, but I'm just copying the names from here. Okay. So now let me do the retrieval. So before that I need to check the connection with my dev work. So because of one thing which I did, what happens is the connection between my dev work and the Salesforce CLI on my machine gets broken frequently. So I need to re-establish it. So generally it doesn't happen on your systems because I was trying something and because of that it's happening. So let me establish the connection first. Post that I will do the retrieval. Okay, so now so let me run the command to establish connection. Okay, so now I will run the retrieval command. Okay, so in order to do this retrieval, so I'll tell you one more command which you can make use of in order to retrieve the components from a Salesforce. So earlier we saw a command which used to retrieve the components specified in the package.xml. So instead of that, I will show you a different command. So with that, what happens is it will be possible to retrieve the components without using the package.xml as well. But you should specify the type of the component as well as the name of the components in the command itself. So the command is force colon source colon retrieve hyphen m. So the retrieve command will support a parameter or option called as metadata. So we can either use metadata option or we can also use it with the help of hyphen m option. So what I will do is for this hyphen m option, so I will pass in the type of the component that needs to be retrieved as well as the name of the component. So whenever you use this metadata option, how you can specify the components is like in double quotes, you can specify the type of the component followed by the name type as well as the name of the component. So now what I will do is I need to retrieve two classes. So what I will do is I'll type in the like I will provide the components in this manner. So and I need to retrieve this from an org whose alias name is vpath dev. Let me run this. So the retrieval got completed. So if you see here, the way how I passed in the component names, so I made use of this hyphen m option that is supported by retrieve command. So for this, like I passed in the type as well as the name of each component, like in a comma separated list. So I will show you this in the document as well. So if I go to the CLI documentation, source retrieve. Okay, so if you see here, so there is an option called as hyphen hyphen metadata that is supported by this retrieve command. So I made use of this particular metadata option. So like the purpose of this metadata option or parameter is like if you want to retrieve the components without using package.xml file, you can do that with the help of this hyphen hyphen metadata option. So like for each of the options or parameters that are supported by a command, like you can specify the actual parameter or option name, or you can also use the shorthand notation. So instead of specifying hyphen hyphen metadata, so I made use of this hyphen m shorthand notation. So like for this, what I did is like I specified the components that needs to be retrieved. So that's how we can retrieve the components using without using package.xml. So the same parameter or option will be supported by the source deploy command as well. So if you want to deploy the commands by without making use of package.xml, you can make use of this option. So now the retrieval got completed. So now what I will do is I will run the deploy command. So I will make use of the same option in order to do the deployment. So if I want, I can make use of, I can deploy the components using the package.xml as well. So first let me deploy the components using package.xml. So let me change this. So I'll remove this and I will make use of manifest parameter. So like because the package.xml file should be passed as input to manifest parameter. So here I will pass in the package.xml to manifest parameter. Okay. So now while doing this deployment, so if you deploy using this particular command, what happens is the components in package.xml gets deployed to the org whichever we specify here. So now what I want to do is like I need to run a test class. So while deploying these two classes, so like if we simply run the deploy command in this manner, what happens is like the class and the test class so gets deployed because we have a class as well as package test class in the package.xml. But if you want to run any test class while doing any deployment, so what you should do is you should make use of two parameters. So one is run tests. So there is a parameter called as run test as well as so you should also make use of one more parameter called as test level. So for test level parameter, so this test level parameter supports four different types of values as the inputs. So in Salesforce, the possible values for test level are So there are four possible values for test level. So let me write them down here. So the possible values for test level are no test run. Like if you don't want to run any test classes while doing the deployment, you can specify the value as no test run. And if you want to run some test classes, like the test classes of your own choice, then you will specify the value for test level parameter as run specified test. And there are two other values supported by this test level option, which is run local tests, and the other one is run all tests. So like when you specify no test run, what happens is like no test classes like gets ran or run when you do the deployment. So it is equivalent to uh, specifying nothing, like it is equivalent to not making use of this test level parameter. So whether you specify test level, the value of test level parameter as no test run is equivalent to like not making use of test level. So like if you don't specify any test level, by default what happens is like the value for this test level will be set to no test run and the deployment gets executed. But there is a different case for this. Like while you do deployments to production type orgs, the default value for test level will be different. But for now, let's forget about that. So we'll come to that point later. But these are the four possible values that you can pass as an input to test level parameter. So now my requirement is, so let's just focus on run specified test. I need to run a test class of my own choice when I do the deployment. So for that, what I will do is I will make use of this run specified test value. And so for test level parameter, I am passing in the input as run specified test. And for run test, what I will do is I will pass in the name of the class that needs to get that needs to be run while doing this deployment. So here, so just focus on this run specified test option. So we'll come to the remaining three values in a later session. So now what will happen is like first Salesforce will do a validation. So validation of the components that are present in this package.xml. So after validation, what it will do is it will run the test classes and post like once these two steps gets completed, then it will do the actual deployment. So I can show you that as well. So if I go to the QA org, so I'm going to deployment status. So if we look at the last successful deployment, so here if you see here, what Salesforce did is first it validated the components in the package.xml. After that, it also ran the test class as well. So you can see those two checks here. So as both of these got successful, Salesforce did the deployment. So sometimes what happens is like when you run these test classes, like if the test if the class doesn't get like a coverage of more than 75%, the what happens is like in that case the deployment will fail, throwing an error called as code coverage error. So like whenever you run test classes, so if the class doesn't get more than 75% coverage, so then what happens is like the deployment doesn't happen. Salesforce will throw you an error saying that code coverage error. So, and one more thing is like whenever you run test classes while doing the deployments, so even though you have a coverage of more than 75%, and if the test methods gets failed, so even in that case, the deployment doesn't happen. So we will see the case of what is meant by test methods getting failed. So generally, like in test classes, what happens is like we'll have something called as test methods. So, so like if these test methods doesn't get passed. Even in that case, what happens is like Salesforce doesn't allow us to make the deployment. So as of now, like what we have is like we have a class. What this class will do is like there is one method inside this particular class. So if you don't have any programming knowledge, don't worry. So like I'm just trying to explain you like what is the purpose of test method. So as of now, like this particular class has one method. So what this method will do is like it will accept a decimal number as an input, and it will convert that decimal number actually like it will accept a Fahrenheit number as an input, and it will convert that Fahrenheit number to equivalent Celsius number. So that's what this particular method is doing here. So now if you look at the test class, so there are four methods in the test class. So now in the test class, what this test class is doing is like it is programmatically checking so whether this particular method is returning the expected results or not. So first they are passing a value of 21.11 and sorry, like they are passing in a value of 70. So the equivalent Celsius number for 70 Fahrenheit is 21.11. So they are passing 70 as the input, and they are checking here whether the class is returning 21.11 as the value or not. Similarly, they are passing in a value of 32, and the equivalent Celsius number for 32 Fahrenheit is 0. And when 32 is passed as input to that particular class, they are checking whether 0 is getting returned or not. Similarly, like they are passing couple of other values as well. So this is nothing but this is programmatic way of testing a class. So now as of now, like with the class code which I have here, all of the methods are getting passed. So now what I will do is wantedly, I will make one of the test method to fail. So in order to do that, what I will do is I will change this to 21.0. So what happens now is like when I pass 70 as input to that particular class will return 21.11 as the value. So when this statement gets executed, so 21.11 will not be equal to 21.0, and ultimately what happens is like this test method gets failed. So now what I will do is I'm saving this class. So let me run this class. So now what happens is so one of the test method gets failed. So if I go to so like whenever you run any test class from Salesforce, so what you can do is after running the test class, you can go to this test tab on developer console, and you can check the status of the uh, test class. So now if you see here, three methods got passed and one method got failed. So the meaning of this is nothing but like one of the test method got failed. So now if I try to deploy the class by running this piece of test class code, so what happens is like Salesforce won't allow us to do the deployment. So now what I will do is I will retrieve this code which I modified, and I will try to do the deployment. So here in developer console, I will retrieve the class code, and if I try to do the deployment by running the test class, so let's see what happens now. So if you see here, you can see a message saying deployment failed. So if I go to the QA or and let me open the deployment which got failed. So if you see here, so what Salesforce did is like first it validated the components in the package.xml. So after the validation, it ran the test class. So in test class, there are four methods. So it executed each of those methods separately. And out of those four methods, one method got failed. So as one of the test method is getting failed, what happened here is like the deployment is getting failed. So in order for this deployment to happen, so even that test method should get passed. So generally, like whenever you face these kind of issues, like you will notify the development team saying that the deployment failed because of a test class failure. So please fix the test class in order to in order for the deployment to happen. So like generally, like whenever you get deployment errors, you will explain the development team that the deployment got failed because of this reason. So based on whenever you inform this to the development team, they will work on the fixes. You are not required to do anything as a DevOps or release engineer. So now, so this is one point, and another point is the deployment gets failed if the test methods doesn't pass, and one more point is even if the class doesn't have more than 75% coverage, in that case the deployment gets failed when you deploy code to production environments. So in real time, what happens we will see uh, uh, something called as sandboxes, and there will be something called as production environment. Like for each project there will be only one production environment. So in some projects we will have multiple production environments as well, but that is a very rare case. So in most of the real-time projects you will see one production environment, and all of the other environments which we make use of are called as sandboxes. So now, while deploying to production environment, it's while deploying code to sandboxes, it's not required to run the test classes. But if you want to deploy like uh, certain types of components to production, so in that case we should definitely run the test classes. So generally, even though it is not required to run test classes while doing deployments to sandboxes, in real-time projects which follow DevOps process, what happens they will also run the test classes while doing the deployments to sandboxes as well. So now the points which you should remember is, so while deploying certain types of components to production environments, it is mandatory to run the test classes. But while deploying those same types of components to sandboxes, it is not mandatory to run the test classes. But in real-time projects, what happens is they will also run the test classes on sandboxes as well. Now, when it comes to those certain types of components, so a few examples for that are all of the coding components. Like Apex class is a coding component on the Salesforce platform. Similarly, we have something called as Visualforce pages, and we have something called as lightning components, and we have something called as apex triggers. So there are few types of components. While deploying these types of components to production environments, what happens you should definitely run a test class. So if you don't run a test class, what happens is in that case Salesforce doesn't allow you to do the deployment. So but when it comes to sandboxes, you can deploy these components without running the test classes as well. So we will come to more on this in a later session, when we see the other tools. But for now, in order to just give you an understanding on how we can run the test classes while doing the deployments, I took this particular case. So we will see the other cases as well. So what happens if you don't get the enough coverage, those cases we will see in the later sessions. For now, you can just remember how we can run the test classes while doing the deployment. So that can be done by making use of these two parameters. One is the test level, and the other one is run test parameters. So next thing is, so these are the cases. So a few cases which you should be aware of while doing the deployments. There are few other cases as well which you should be aware of. Actually, I have prepared a sheet, and I specified the some of the cases in that particular sheet. So I'll share that particular sheet later. But for now, we will stop the discussion on these cases here, and we will move on to the next topic. So one more thing is, I said you that there is a case of deploying new profiles. So we will even discuss that case later. So for now, what we will do is, so we will consider the case of setting up the CI/CD for a project. CI/CD process for a Salesforce project. So where SFDX is used as the build tool, and so let's assume that let's use Bitbucket as the repository, and Bitbucket is used as the repository. So for this particular project, so what I will do is, so I will show you the things. Suppose in real time, if you are asked to set up the CI/CD process using similar set of tools like SFDX as the build tool and Bitbucket as the repository. So I'll show you the all of these steps that you need to follow in order to set up the process. So now, in order to do this, first thing is like what you should do is generally like if it is a fresh project, so like let's assume that we are setting the this process for a fresh project. So now, if you set up this kind of process for a fresh project, what happens is like for a fresh project, generally like people will purchase a Salesforce account. So whenever a company purchases a Salesforce account, they will get access to production type of environment. And from this production type of environment, so what happens is like people will create the other environments. Like they will create UAT and they will create QA, as well as they will also create the development environments as well. So based on the uh, number of development teams whichever are required for that particular project, they will create those many development sandboxes. Now let's assume that for this particular project, so we have a production environment, a UAT, a QA, and two development orgs. Now, so once the environments are created, the next step is like what you should do is you should create something called as repository. Repository. So now the purpose of using the generally like a Bitbucket is nothing but it is one of the Git providers. So when it comes to Git providers, there are a lot of Git providers available in the market. So like more or less each one will have the same set of features. It completely depends on the companies on which Git provider to be chosen. So like we have something called as GitHub, and we have something called as GitLab, and we have something called as Azure DevOps. Even Azure DevOps has Git provider services, and we have something called as Bitbucket. And so apart from this, so like these are few of the Git providers available, and some of the most frequently used Git providers. Now, so that there is a difference between Git and Git provider. So Git is nothing but so it is an application, so like which has which is nothing but it is and Git is nothing but it is an example of a version control system. So when it comes to Git, so like you can consider Git as a software, and when it comes to Git providers, like Git is a software which has the capability to track the changes that happens on a file. So Git is a version control system. So I'm using the shorthand notation. Git is a version control system which has the capability to track changes on file. And so like it is nothing but it is an application. So Git is nothing but it is an application. Now, when it comes to Git providers, like any of the Git providers like Bitbucket, GitHub, GitLab, or Azure DevOps. So when it comes to, let's consider Bitbucket as the Git provider. So Git providers, so these are nothing but like you can consider this as a server, or this can be considered as a server, or like it can also be called as a repository hosting service. So this can be called as repository hosting service, or you can also consider this as servers as well, because they will be hosted on a remote server. So now what happens with these Git providers is like all of the Git providers comes like integrated with Git. So apart from the features of Git, they will also have some extra features as well. So all of the Git providers, what happens is like they will have the all of the features that are supported by Git, as well as they will also have some extra features as well. So like whenever if someone asks you like if both Git and GitHub are same, like they are not both of them are not same. Like actually like a Git is a version control system which has the capability to track changes to files. When it comes to GitHub, so GitHub is a repository hosting service, so which has all of the features supported by Git, but it also has some extra features as well. So actually like I prepared a document, so I'm not going to the theoretical things. So I have specified all of the things these theoretical statements in that particular document. So you can let me share you that sheet as well. Uh, so Git. Okay, so if you look at this document, so once the group gets created, I will share this document in that particular group so that you can go through this. So this will contain the definitions of the terms which I'm using. Like if you see here, so you can see here I added like what is meant by a version control system and the types of version control systems and what is meant by Git, as well as if you see here, I have also specified the differences between Git and GitHub. So if you look at here, so Git is nothing but it is a software or it is a application. When it comes to GitHub, like it is a service or generally like it will be called as these will be called as repository hosting services. So it is not only applicable to GitHub. Sorry, did someone said anything? Okay, so there is nothing. You can stay on mute. So if you look at this particular document, so if you look at the differences between Git and GitHub, so Git is a software, so which is nothing but you can consider it as application, so which has the capability to uh, track changes to files. Now, when it comes to GitHub, so it is a repository hosting service, so it has all the features of Git, and it also has some additional features as well. So generally, Git was developed by Linux. So this application was developed by Linux. When it comes to GitHub, GitHub is a Microsoft application. When it comes to Git, it is a command line tool. So like uh, while working with Git, what happens is in order to make use of the features of Git, generally we will make use of a command line. And when it comes to GitHub, it is like a web application. So what happens is everything you can achieve through point and click. So that's the reason we can consider it as a graphical user interface. So when it comes to Git, it can be installed locally on any system. So when it comes to these Git providers, like they will be hosted on web, and they can be accessed through uh, browsers. So when it comes to the purpose of Git, it is a version control system which will be used to track the changes to source code. So now when it comes to these hosting services, they will have a lot of other features as well. Apart from Git, the features of Git, they will also have a lot of other features as well. So like if I want to tell you some of the features, like they will have the features like pull request, and they will also have features to uh, user management features as well. Generally, you can add multiple users to the same Git repository. Apart from that, they will also have some features related to project management as well. So now, Git generally doesn't have user management feature, but when it comes to Git providers, they will have the user management features. So apart from this, I have also specified the few Git commands in this particular document. So we will come to these commands in the next session. So for now, you can go through this document when you get this document in the channel. So now what I will do next is, so let me go back to this. So the same points gets applicable to all of the other Git providers. So what happens with these Git providers, like they will come integrated with Git. So they will have all the features of the Git, and they will also have the extra features as well. So now we will consider the Bitbucket as the repository. So we'll also see a project where we will make use of GitHub as well. But for this first project, let's assume Bitbucket as the repository, because the UI of Bitbucket will be somewhat user friendly. Like it will be somewhat simpler to under somewhat simpler to do the things using Bitbucket UI when we compare it with GitHub UI. So it's not it's that difficult. So generally, like most of the things will be same, but Bitbucket UI will be somewhat simpler when we compare it with GitHub UI. So for the first project, let's consider Bitbucket as the repository. So now So first thing is you need to know few things on repository and the futures of Git. So repository is nothing but it is a storage location where we store our application code, or in simple terms, so in simple language, repository can be considered as a folder. So repository is nothing but it is a folder which where we will store the application code. So generally, when it comes to application code, so it will be contained in some files. So generally, like for each component, if you remember while we done these deployments, so like if you remember whenever we do any retrieval, so we will get a code file related to that particular component. So application code is nothing but the code is nothing but it is a collection of files. So the code of a component or the component's code will be present in something called as files. So here we call them as metadata files. So application code is nothing but it is a collection of files. So repository can be considered as a folder which stores the application code. So now, apart from repository, this is the meaning of repository. So repository is nothing but generally people will won't call it as a folder, but they will call it as a storage location where the application code will be stored. And so one more thing is like when it comes to storing code in repository, what happens like we won't directly store the code in repository. What happens is like we will store the code in something called as branches. So branches is nothing but you can consider branches as a subfolder of repository. So the code will be stored inside branches, but it won't be stored in a repository. So branches can be considered as a subfolder of repository. So now when it comes to branches, so as I said, again branch is nothing but it is a folder. And when it comes to both of these repository and branches, what happens is these will have few properties which a normal folder doesn't have. So when it comes to normal folder, so what happens is normal folder doesn't have the capability to track changes to the files. But when it comes to repository folder or even the branches folder, so these will have the capability to track the changes on the files. Now, so this is the meaning of repository and branches. Now, what we will do is, so I will as of now, like all of these orgs are created. What I did is I created 5 different Salesforce Developer Edition accounts. So I will make use of one of those as production, the other as UAT, the other as QA, and the rest of the other two as Dev1 and Dev2. And so I will create a Bitbucket repository in Bitbucket, and post that we will see the next steps that needs to be done in order to set up the CI/CD process. So as of now, I already have this particular org. So I have already created multiple developer edition accounts. So you too can create 5 different orgs. You can use one as the production, use one as UAT, and use the remaining other 3 as QA, Dev1 and Dev2. So you can, in order to differentiate these sorts, you can name the, you can provide a value of the environment name in the username. So like I said you in one of the sessions earlier. So in order to differentiate these sorts, you can provide the environment names as well in the username. So now what I will do is, as of now, I have this production environment or production org created, and I have a Bitbucket account created already. So if you want to create a Bitbucket account, it's very simple. So you can type in Bitbucket sign up in browser. So if you click on Bitbucket sign up, so you can pick the this URL bitbucket.org.product. So you will see a login button here. So generally you should also see sign up button. Let me click on login. Okay, so actually there is one repository which got logged in that particular browser. That's why directly got logged in. Okay, so I have already logged into one of the, or it might, so it's the process will be very simple. So you'll see a sign up button and it will ask you for a few details. So like providing those details, what happens is like you can, even this is not required for you. Let me, okay, so as I have already logged in, so it is directly logging me to the Bitbucket account. So like when you click on login, so like you'll see a sign up button, click on sign up and you will provide basic details. So like the basic details like your name and email, that's it. So the account creation process is simple. So once you have the account created, so like when you log into that particular Bitbucket account, so this is how the Bitbucket uh, application looks like. So like when you log into the application, you will see the like a page similar to this. So you'll see tabs like your work, pull request, repositories, projects, people, and more. So we will concentrate on. So like we will concentrate on how we can create a repository first, and later we will also see like what are all the steps that we need to do in order to set up that particular project. So creation of account is very simple. So I'm not showing you that. So you can create an account for yourself. And after creating the account, if you log into Bitbucket, it will look similar to this. So now what I will do here is I'll create a repository. So for every project, what happens like there will be a repository created in the Git provider. So we are considering Bitbucket as the Git provider for this particular project. So now what I will do is I'll create a repository. So what I will do is let me name it as um, demo Vpath SFDX. So it's not like we should provide only some types of names as the values. We can provide any value as the name. So generally for real-time projects, what happens like they will create the repository with the project name itself. So for now, what I will do is I will name this as Salesforce project, Salesforce project hyphen vpath or vpath one. So I don't have any repository with this name. So I will name this repository as Salesforce project vpath one. So while creating the repository, so there are few options here. So you can see something called as access level. So so this is nothing but, so when you set the access level as private repository, only authorized persons will be able to access the contents inside this particular repository. So, but if you set the access level as public, what happens like even like it will be accessible to everyone, whoever has access to this particular Bitbucket account. So that's the meaning of private and public. So private is nothing but it will be having restricted access. Public is nothing but everyone, whoever has access to the Bitbucket account will be able to access that particular repository. So generally, like all of the real-time projects, like all of the repositories which are we create in real time, we will create them as private repositories only. So we won't create public repositories for real-time projects. So apart from that, so you can see something called as include a README. So include a README file. So generally, like README is nothing but it will contain the information of why like the purpose of the repository. So README can be considered. You can consider this as a description. So like it will contain the details of like what is the purpose of what is the purpose of repository. So like it's not mandatory that we should include the README file. So you can skip it. So for now, like I'm not setting this value to no. And so if you see here, it is also asking us to specify the default branch name as well. So I'm not specifying the default branch name as well. And you can see one more option called as include dot git ignore. So there is a purpose for this dot git ignore. So we'll come to this purpose later. For now, like what I will do is even for this dot git ignore option, I'm setting the value as no. And apart from that, so you can see something called as forking. So we'll come to the meaning of forking later. So for now, I'll set this option to no forks. And for language, so like we can set the language as Apex. So because the language used on Salesforce platform is Apex, so we can set the language as Apex for Salesforce projects. So as of now, like what I did is I just gave a name I just gave a name for repository. And so for all of the other options, like I have set the value as no, and for language, I have chosen the language value as Apex. And here, so in Bitbucket, what happens like whenever you create a repository, so the repository should be linked to project as well. So again, project is nothing but it is used to group repositories. So now, as I can't create a repository without linking it to project, so I have created a few projects earlier. So creation of project is very simple. So what you can do is uh, you go to the home page, you will see something called as projects. So the purpose of now project is very simple. So it's used to just group the repositories. So if you have multiple repositories for a single project, in order to group all of the repositories under one single name, you can create a project. So generally, like when people use Bitbucket as the repository, first what they will do is like they will create a project, and so like they will create a repository under that particular project. So you can give some random name, SFDX demo. So I'm giving some random name. Like creating a project is a simple thing. So like you can just provide the name, and all of the real-time projects will be created as private projects. So like if you want to attach a logo to the project, you can do that, and we can click on create project. So with this, what happens like a project gets created. So the purpose of project is nothing but it is just used to group the repositories. So for now, what I will do is I created one project in the earlier batch session. So I'll make use of that particular project. So project is nothing but it is just used to group the repositories. So now with these details, I click on create repository. Okay. So now what happened is like the repository got created. So as of now, like in this particular repository, there is nothing. So as we have set the options to include README and include .git ignore to no, what happened is like a empty repository got created. So empty repository in the sense a empty folder got created. And this particular repository as of now, like it doesn't have anything. Now so after creating the repository, whenever you add the first file to the repository, so what happens is whenever you add a first file to the repository, what happens is like a branch gets created automatically. So now what I will do is I will click on create a README. So when I click on create README, so what happens is like this is the default code. Uh, so README is nothing but it is a file and it contains this as the content inside that particular file. So now what I am doing is like forget about the content that is getting displayed here. So it is the default content that is getting appear. So now what I will do is, so if you want to add any files or folders to repository, we won't call it as adding. So we call it as committing. So commit is nothing but adding a file or folder to repository can be considered as commit. So now, in order to add this particular file to the repository, I'm clicking on commit. So I click on commit. So when I clicked on commit, what happened is like a file got added to the repository. That's it. So adding a file will be called as commit in Git terminology. So now if I open this particular file, this particular has this particular content which came by default. Forget about the content that is getting displayed here. So, but what you can remember is we added a file to the repository. The name of the file is readme.md. So now whenever you add first file to a repository, or whenever you commit the first file to the repository, what happens is like a branch gets created. So now so what happened here is like earlier in the first step we created a repository, and after that we added a file to the repository. So when we added the file, what happened is like a branch got created, and the name of the branch that gets created when the first commit happens is like it will generally have this name called as main. So if you want the branch to be created with a different name, so if you remember while creating the repository, we had a field called as default branch name. So if you provide a different value there, what happens is like the branch gets created with the value whichever you provide. So if I go here, so if I click on create repository, so here, so there is a field called as a default branch name. Suppose if you want to create the default branch with the name as master, so you can provide master as the name here. So in real time, what happens is Generally, for the default branches, people will either use main or master as the names. So it varies from project to project. So now let's use the same branch which got created by default. The branch got created with the name as main. So let's make use of that. So as of now, what you should understand is how we can create a repository. And so what happens when we add uh, a file to the repository for the first time. So when we add a file for the first time to the repository, what happens a branch gets created, and generally the name of the branch will be main. But if you want to create that particular branch with a different name, it is possible. You should provide the different name at the time of creating the repository. So as of now, we have created a repository, and that particular repository has a single branch inside that, and that branch has a single file in that particular uh, folder or that branch. So that particular branch has only one file inside it as of now. Now, the next step is what we should do is the purpose of repository is in order to store the application code. So generally, the application code will be present in for Salesforce projects, the application code will be present inside Salesforce also. Now, the next step is what we should do is we should retrieve the application code from the Salesforce orgs, and we should push the application code to the repository, or we should add the application code to the repository. So now, in order to do that, what you should do is first you should retrieve the code from the Salesforce org, and after retrieving the code from the Salesforce org, you should push that code to the repository or to the branch which we have inside the repository. So now, in order to do that, so while working with repositories, so one more point which you should remember is if you want to add a file, if you want to add a file to a repository, you can directly do it from the UI. So here what happens is here, so you can see an option called as add file, but it won't be possible to add a folder to a repository directly from the UI. So from the Bitbucket UI, so it is possible to add a file to the repository, but it won't be possible to add a folder directly to the repository. So now, so if you want to add a folder to the repository, how we can do that is, so in order to do that, you should follow a few steps. So first is you should get the repository into your local machine. So first step is we should get the repository to the local machine. So in order to do that, so let me open a new folder here. Okay. So what I will do is I will not open any folder. So, but will what I will do is I will open a new terminal, and what I will do is, so as of now, my terminal is pointing to a folder whose name is saikumar.chintakunta on my system. So now what I will do is, so as we can't directly add a folder to a repository from the repository UI or from Bitbucket UI. So first we should get that repository into our local machine. So in order to get a repository into our local machine, so what you can do is you can run a command called as git clone. So every repository, what happens is every repository has a URL associated with it. So if you click on clone button, what happens is you will find the URL associated with that particular repository. So here, so on the repository page, what happens is you will see a button called as clone, and when you click on clone button, you will see this URL. So the generally the URLs will start with HTTPS. So I'm copying the URL of this repository. So this URL is nothing but the URL of the repository which I created. So I'm copying this URL. So in order to get this repository into my machine, so I need to make use of git commands. So now, if you want to make use of Git commands on your system, first you should install something called as Git for desktop or Git bash on your machine. So you can install. So as of now, Git is installed on my machine. So while if you want to run Git commands on your machine, you should install Git on your machine. So you can install Git. You can simply type in Git, and you can pick this URL git-scm.com. So here you will find the download links for different OS. So what you can do is like based on the operating system which you are using, so you can download Git onto your system, and you can download Git onto your system. And as it happens with any command line tool, so after you download it, so what you will do is you will install that particular application on your machine. So after doing the installation, so in order to check whether the installation is successful or not, you can type in a command called as git hyphen hyphen version. So generally the reason why we do this is like in order to check whether the installation is successful or not. So if I type in git space hyphen version, so what is happening is like it is saying, so it is not a supported parameter. So let me simply type in git. So, so generally I think I should git hyphen v. Let me, okay. So when I typed in git space hyphen hyphen version, what is happening is like it is displaying the git version that is installed on my system. So in order to check whether the installation is successful or not, you can type in run this command on your terminal, or you can also simply run git as well. So if I run git, what is happening is like it is displaying uh, it is displaying me this information. So if you see here, what is happening is like it is displaying few of the Git commands and their usage information as well. But like if Git is not installed on your system, and when you type in Git, what happens, like it will throw you a message saying that unknown command or unrecognized command Git. So it happens with any command line tool. So even if you remember, when we tried to this step which I showed you after installing the Salesforce CLI, I said that you can run SFDX space hyphen hyphen version command in order to check whether the installation is successful or not. So this command, so in order to just check whether the installation is successful or not, you will run this command. And if it does not display any message like unrecognized command Git, that means that your installation is successful. So generally you can run this git space hyphen hyphen version command. So what happens with this is like it will display you the version of the git that is installed on your system. So if you want to run git commands on your system, so you should install git on your system. So you can install it from the standard Git website based on your OS. So as of now, Git is installed on my system. So while doing the installation, after downloading that installation file, so when you click on install, what happens is like you will be popped up with different messages. You can keep the default settings and click on install. So you are not required to change any of the settings. Now, as of now, I have Git installed on my system. So the reason why we require Git on our system is like if you want to interact with repositories from your local machine. So the reason why we are installing Git on our system is if you want to interact with repositories from your local machine. So then in that case, you should have Git installed on your system. So as of now, like I have a repository on Bitbucket server. So if I want to interact with this repository, which is present on Bitbucket server, so then I should have Git installed on my machine. So this interaction will be possible with the help of Git only. So we can't direct, like there is no other way in order to communicate with the repositories hosted on a different server. So now I have Git installed on my system. So in order to get this repository to my system, so what I will do is I will copy this URL. So I'm copying the URL of this repository. And after this, what I will do is I will run a command called as git clone followed by the URL whichever I have copied. So when you run this particular command, what happens is the repository gets cloned into your local machine. So I said that repository is nothing but it is a folder. Now when I run this particular command, what happens like a folder gets created in our machine. So let me run this particular command. Okay. So now what happened is like a folder got created with this name. So whenever you run git clone command, so a folder gets created with the same name as the repository. So I created a repository with the name Salesforce project vpath one. So now when I ran this git clone command, a folder with the same name got created on my machine. So now let me open that particular folder. So if I go here, so I can see that folder here. So if you see here, so the folder got created and you can see the readme.md file inside this particular folder. So because even our repository folder contained only one file. So we can see the same file inside the folder which got created on our machine. So now what I will do is let me open the terminal. So now this particular folder, it is nothing but it is a repository folder. So the repository folder, whichever we have on our machine, it will be called as local repository, and the repository that will be available on the remote server, that will be called as remote repository. So now the repository that is available on the Bitbucket server is called as remote repository, and the repository that is available on my machine will be called as local repository. So now, if you want to add application code to a repository, so how you can do that is, first you should get the application code to the local repository, and from here you should put the application code to the remote repository. So now how we can do that is, like in order to do that, in order to get the in order to get the application code to this particular folder, what you will do is, like, you will make use of SFDX commands. Like when you run SFDX commands, what happens is, like the application, we can make use of those SFDX commands in order to retrieve the application code. So once you get the code, so what happens is, like you will push that particular code to the remote repository. But in order to do this, you won't be able to do that with the help of one single button or option. Like there is no command like git add or git commit to directly add the changes from local machine to the from local repository to the remote repository. Like there are few steps and few points which you should be aware of in order to move the application code from from local repository to remote repository. So we will see those points in the tomorrow session. So we will see how we can bring the code from a Salesforce org to the local repository, and we will also see how we can push the application code to the remote repository in the tomorrow session. Okay, so I'll stop the discussion here. And if you have any questions, you can stay back and ask me. Otherwise, you can drop off.
Hi, Saigar. Good morning.
Hi, Raj. Good morning.
Yeah. Can you come up with a plan like how each topic can be covered in how many days? Like Bitbucket, how many days? COPADO, how many days? Like that, so that we will plan accordingly.
So for COPADO, it takes 7 days, 6 to 7 days.
Great. Okay.
Yeah. So even for Bitbucket, it will take something. Yeah, it will take around 6 to 7 days.
These two will take 6 to 7 days.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
No, 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 no. Only Bitbucket. This Bitbucket plus SFDX will take something between 5 to 7 days. COPADO will definitely take some 6 to 7 days. So together, both of this will take in between 12 to 14 days.
12 to 14 days. Okay. And the
Yeah.
rest of the topics, what are the other
So
topics we are covering?
yes, once we cover these two, like we will also see the case of how we can set up the process for SFDX and GitHub. Like instead of Bitbucket, we'll use GitHub as the repository. And so one more thing is, like after this, what happens is, like we will also see how we can configure pipelines in Bitbucket. So like it will take some 3 to 4 days, because in order to learn that, you will require knowledge on YAML, and you will also require some basic knowledge and shell scripting as well. So it will require some 3 to 4 days.
Okay.
And
But
after
what
that,
about what about COPADO, sir? COPADO also we are going to create pipelines or
yes, yes, we are going to create.
both the places? Okay.
Yes, yes. So when it
So
comes to
that
Copado,
covers.
you will.
Yeah,
Mm,
so
mm.
that covers two systems, complete CI/CD.
Yes, yes.
Thank
Yeah. Okay.
Practicing like after class, what we have to practice and where we have to. Do you have any assignment to like?
Yes, so generally I will do that. So once like these people will create a WhatsApp group, so I'm waiting for that group to be created. Like they will
Okay.
create a WhatsApp group and they will add me as well to that group. So generally, I will share the documents and the tasks in that particular group. So I'm waiting
First,
for that group to be created.
lot of settings. So all we need practice. Otherwise,
Yeah,
we'll
yeah.
see today and tomorrow we'll forget.
Yes, yes. So generally, yeah. So even I'm
And
aware of that.
while you're teaching we are also understand, and with practice we are come with our doubts, like whatever doubts we have. Otherwise, you will cover the topic and we will like behind
Yeah, yeah,
that.
I understood. So generally, I will give some kind of things for practice, like whenever a topic gets completed. So yeah, so like once that group gets created, I can share them there.
Oh,
And so like if the I want to speak with the people who joined through Pradeep. So I like actually like I spoke with Pradeep the other day. So he said to me that all of the people who joined through Pradeep doesn't have any Salesforce background. So I remember, I think Leela is one of the person who joined through Pradeep. So other than Leela, I'm not sure who all joined through Pradeep. So Leela,
Yes,
apart from Leela, is there anyone who joined through Pradeep here? Okay. So I'll assume there are no other people apart from Leela. Okay. So Leela, actually, Pradeep said to me that you don't have the Salesforce background.
yes,
So like I will tell you, yeah. So I will tell you what we can do with you. Don't worry. So
okay.
once the group gets created, we will get on a call and we'll speak. So I'll tell you how you can follow the sessions.
Yeah, sure, sir. Thank you.
No problem. Okay then. So we will meet again tomorrow at the same time.
This is a question to Visualpath. Please share this session as soon as possible so that we can practice.
Okay. I think there is no one from Visualpath here.
Oh,
I
okay,
will
okay,
let
Nandini.
them know. Okay.
Thank
yes, I mean, who's the contact person? Like,
So I'm not sure. I think Triveni is the person whom you can contact. There are two people. One of the person name is Triveni and the other one name is Malati. So you can reach out to any of them.
okay,
Uh, yeah, they will assist you. Generally, they will upload the recordings to one portal and they will create an account for you. You can access the recordings from that particular account.
okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Okay. Okay then. We'll meet again in tomorrow's session.